So, hi everybody, and welcome to the Women of Color Remake Wellness Sunday Wellness discussion. So today we will be talking about decolonizing wellness, and we've got some amazing panelists who will be posing different questions to. But before I introduce the panelists, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Chongo Bwalia, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. So just a little piece about me. I'm a yoga teacher. I'm based in Ottawa, and I'm also the creator of an initiative called Anona Wellness, which is focused on reducing cultural barriers to wellness amongst BIPoC communities. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to all of our panelists. We've got Kathy, we have Elise, Lashana, and Sheena, and they'll all be talking about the concept of decolonizing wellness. So pass it off to all of you to introduce yourselves.
Okay, I'll go first. My name is Lashana. I am the founder and CEO of Nurture Botanics. We are a company that's focused on helping people become more intentional with their wellness practices through the use of botanics.
So my name is Sheena, or Sheena Denise. I do many things, but I'm here under One People TO today. So that's a actual physical space that all peoples can rent, but it's really specifically focused as a space holder for Black, Indigenous people of color, particularly in the wellness community, but in all industries that may need a space where they can host their own clients, access different events, and an opportunity to connect with others as well, and really focused on expanding the lens of what wellness means through One People TO.
Hi, I'm Elise, and I am a therapist. I'm the creator of the Well Therapist, so focusing on mental wellness in the Black community and just overall using a wellness and holistic approach. Also a yoga therapist, trying to bring yoga in a different mindset, not mostly that Western concept, but really embracing spirituality and wellness.
Hi, my name is Kathy. I'm a yoga teacher in the Gatineau, Ottawa region. I've been teaching for 2 years. I just had a 2-year anniversary the other day, so that's great. And I'm really just here to give my take on what I see and what I've been told about the yoga space in Ottawa. Thanks for having me.
So thank you to everybody for introducing yourselves. And Beatrice, would you like to introduce yourself as well as the founder of Women of Color Remake Wellness?
But yeah, so I'm Beatrice. I'm also based in Ottawa. I'm a yoga teacher. I don't teach that much lately, but I'm a certified yoga teacher. I created Women of Color Remake Wellness out of the need to create a space for women of color within the Ottawa area where we're given like voice, and also we're centralized within when it comes to discussion regarding health and wellness, which is something that is very much lacking in Ottawa. There's a lot of health and wellness discussion, but often we don't see people who are very colorful like ourselves being represented for not given voice. So the objective of Women of Color is essentially to be a platform. I'll pass it over to you.
Amazing. So before we get into today's panel discussion, there are a few housekeeping items that I do want everybody to be aware of. So first things first, there is a chat feature, and all attendees, please feel free to submit any questions that come to mind throughout the discussion. We will be reserving about 10 to 12 minutes at the end of the discussion. So we will be reserving about 10 to 12 minutes at the end of the discussion to kind of discuss any questions that anybody submits. Additionally, the talk today is scheduled to go from 7 to 8:30, but we will be sticking around until 9 p.m. So any questions that we don't get through, if you do have time tonight, feel free to stick around until 9. A few of us will be staying around, so feel free to hang out with us. And last but not least, this entire discussion will be posted to the Women of Color Remake Wellness website page. So if you do have to drop off early, or if you know somebody who wanted to come but couldn't make it, it will be available afterwards. So does anybody have any questions about any of that? Perfect. So we will get into the discussion. Our first topic is racism and discrimination. And the first question that I have for our panelists is, how does racism and or discrimination in the health and wellness community impact BIPoC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color? So how does that impact BIPoC women who are professionals in this field?
I would say, just from coming from the United States, that it's not very much represented. So Black women as yoga teachers or just wellness in the wellness industry are not represented at all. So you don't get a better understanding of that Black culture or Indigenous culture aspect. You only get that westernized majority aspect and what their beliefs are. So you don't really get to integrate that, because the curriculums and everything that you learn is based on what is taught by their perspective. So it's hard to really understand how to kind of put yourself or your views or your culture or your race and ethnicity into something that's important to you, even your spirituality. So all of those are kind of taken away. So it's hard to put yourself in there without just going your own way.
Well, for myself, in Ottawa, for instance, I'll say that the way that it impacts women of color, and I'll speak specifically from the Black perspective, the not first of all, not having anyone on staff that looks like you. I have been told by my friends, by friends of friends who just didn't feel comfortable, one, being the only one. Two, as a professional working there, it also has to do with how well do you assimilate and blend into the clientele that's there, how well you blend into the rest of the staff that's there. And that actually might mean just being less like what you really are. So again, within the realm of being a professional, it might require you to dilute your nuances just to not seem aggressive, to not, which are stereotypes that are completely on founded on the basis that, let's say, and again from women's perspective, a Black woman's perspective, it's the minute you not oppose, but the minute you talk to someone, automatically you're viewed as aggressive, so you have to tone down, so you dilute yourself for that. Because you're one of the very few that are teaching at the major studios, you now also feel the need to give your best, which is great, but at the same time, which means that you always have to give your best, because you now have the weight of the Black community on your shoulders to just give a good image of everything, even though you might be, I don't know, you're going through things, everybody's going through things day in, day out, but all of a sudden it's on you. And so these are, I find anyways, these are barriers to either be a teacher, be a student in the current, or at least before the wave of, everybody else's wokeness. The environment was not necessarily the best for everyone. Some people thrived in it, others less so. And I find that that's literally the reason for this.
I think with you mentioning that as well, personally for like the professionals in this industry, it's really heavy. There's a lot of emotions that come with it, just because we see the systemic racism, we feel it too. So it's trying to figure out how to navigate our own emotions, but also be able to serve as well.
I think there is a nuance too with in an industry that's focused on wellness and health, and the distinct cognitive dissonance, I guess, that happens. That happened for me, whereas how do you be well and maintain your health and wellness, and when you go to a space that you can't fully do that? And to me, being fully well means being fully myself. So, if that means that, well, before I stopped relaxing my hair, and, after like a hot, session, maybe that you're like exposed or whatever the situation is. And even beyond that, so specifically, my practices, my spiritual practices, I specifically focus in spiritual wellness. And so Reiki, astrology, tarot, and traditionally those practices have been colored, for lack of a better term, by generally by Caucasian people. And though I've had great experiences, I've also had not great experiences. And I wish that in my evolution, I had more people that looked like me, that I was spiritual wellness. And I think there is something that can't be spoken to by people that are outside of your community.
Yeah, I hear everything that. Sorry, is my internet cutting out a little bit?
I'm not sure if it's yours,
I'm not sure. Yeah, there's a little crackling happening, and I don't know whose it is, but such is life.
Okay, perfect. I just wasn't sure. You can never know if it's your end or not. But did any of the other panelists, like, did anybody have anything addition to add? So I was just going to say that I hear everything that everybody said, and I also feel the same way. There is a certain level of heaviness, a large level of heaviness that comes with it. I think for me too, like as a yoga teacher in the wellness space, like it's always been really hard feeling like you have a lot of pressure put on yourself. What Kathy said really spoke out to me, that you just can't do the wrong thing, because since there's so few, it's like if you're the one who goes and messes it up for everybody else that comes after you, it's a lot to have on you. And knowing that there is this underlying racism that exists, like it's a lot to think about. So I think everybody's points there, and even just what you said, Sheena, about having like, not having a lot of people to look to, right? So not having a lot of like examples. And obviously we have kind of similar ideas, but like, especially in your field, like in Reiki and in astrology, like that's like, there's very few people that I know who are women of color who are Reiki healers. So it's an interesting experience. So
if I could just briefly speak.
Yeah.
And it may happen in other industries too, but I know specifically for things that tend to be intangible, whether it's doing Reiki, because it's something that someone could be like, oh, just put your hands on me. Can I just get like a quick 10 minutes? And I'm sure that happens in other communities too. So, or industries, I should say. And so that is something that I'm very conscious of, and being mindful that maybe people of color or women of color, specifically women, tend to be put in that position where we're often asked to give without any expectation of any kind of reciprocation.
I actually wanted to add, so we were talking about being for those that teach at studios in Ottawa, for instance, where there's the concept of us being one of the few, so you're trying to do the best you can and everything else. But with that also comes those that don't teach at studios, where you now have the imposter syndrome, where there's imposter syndrome for everyone, but I find that for women of color, again, specific to Black women, it might be very different. And I'll say it's because we have in our heads that a yoga teacher is a white teacher. And so you're here as a Black woman trying to be a yoga teacher. And so you feel that you need to give extra or just do more or different, because you need to, one, differentiate yourself and also do just as well as the other white teachers who might not be any more established than you are. So then that brings it to question whether you think you're good enough and whether your students think you're good enough. So let's say, so like I said, I have 2 years experience teaching, specifically teaching. I'm not saying I have taught a lot, but okay, so I don't necessarily get the jitters when I teach at XYZ place, for instance. A white person having the same amount of experience might actually come up in front of their audience in a very different way. I might have to come up to the audience thinking that I need to prove myself to them because I'm probably the only Black yoga teacher they've ever encountered. And so because we're so used to, in our very global minds, seeing a yoga teacher not even as a person from India, but literally as a Caucasian person, you as a white, as a black person now feel that you need to, you know, truly, am I good enough? You start to question yourself, and you now feel that need to do more, compared to our white counterpart who probably has the same questions, especially if they're new, but again with that intersectionality that they don't necessarily have to deal with, right? And then there's also the perception of the students for you, where you know, how often do we give a chance to a student who's, as a matter of fact, who's a person of color versus a white person? We have it in the back of our minds. There are biases that all of us, white or not, have in the back of our minds. And, you know, and then there's the accent with which the person speaks. You know, I was told, I'm not sure, but I was told I have a French accent in the back of my English. So, you know, is that accent something that somebody likes? Or is that all of a sudden now not Canadian enough for you, so that all of a sudden my audience doesn't feel like attending anymore because I'm not Canadian enough, or, you know, things like that. So these are nuances that are not necessarily felt by our white counterparts, which as a Black woman, I do think about just how is my audience perceiving me and all those things. So those are, to me anyways, barriers that are encountered in the wellness space for Black women.
I would say that I resonate a lot with what you're saying as a yoga teacher and as a therapist. So as a therapist, there are not many Black therapists in the area that I work with. So prior to where I live now, I was working with a more diverse community. I was in the Black community, so I felt more comfortable. Now I'm in an area where it's more affluent, and there's more of the Caucasian population, and I ask myself all the time. I had a really hard time in the beginning because I thought that I had to work extra hard. Like, I have to work so hard to be just as good as all these white people in the area, because I am the only person in this area that works with certain developmental disabilities for children. Like, I'm the only person. So it makes me feel like if I'm not here, then I'm not valuable. And also because that people look to me as like, well, you're Black, so we expect you, we already see you down here, so you better perform up here. So it's like that every day, all the time. Best. And then when I say I do yoga, it's like, oh, a Black person doing yoga, like, she has to be knowledgeable. So then I have to come on top of mental health with yoga. And it's just challenging all the time because it's always wanting to be perfection, and then wanting to be the best and wanting to be equal, because I'm naturally bred to be, I'm not equal with my counterpart. You know, I've been trained not to be equal. I've been trained to have to do extra work with, like, to get to that place where I feel like I'm worthy or even valuable. So that's a daily struggle, and that takes time as a person to be able to feel like you are worthy as a Black person, and you don't have to do all the extra work just to be valuable.
I could just add on to that point. So such a great point, you know, and I think what stands out to me is that when we're in these roles, that we are often like the mouthpiece, like seen as the mouthpiece, and almost like people gravitate to you and like, so what do you think, you know? And you're asked to be the mouthpiece. And so you don't want to not say your opinion, but then you don't want to be speaking for every Black person or every person of color or every woman of color or every yoga teacher. So that's something. And then also, of course, within that ask, so many people don't, I think, understand, whether it's white or another culture or whatever, the emotional labor that sometimes goes into it, depending on what the question is. So thanks just for speaking to that, Elise. So apt.
Thank you for your response.
So I love the discussion that we're having here, and I want to extend it a little bit to our next question, which is, so we've talked about how this impacts how racism and discrimination impacts professionals within the field. But how does discrimination and racism in the health and wellness space impact the well-being of the actual BIPoC community? So the people who are going in and taking these classes, and the people in general who are just seeking to experience wellness in whichever form.
Just because
I believe that a lot of times if they're not in an area where they can see similarity, so if I don't see another person that looks like me or has similar experience, then I don't feel comfortable. I would even say that sometimes they can't be their true self, or they may even shift towards whatever's being taught. So if that representation is not aligned with them and they want to experience like Reiki or yoga or mental health, then they're just listening to the professional that's supposed to be the expert, and they may even shift to what they're teaching, even though it might not reflect or be in alignment with them. So having that representation is really important so they can feel like there's some representation or somebody that's in alignment with them that they resonate with. So that's really important for the client or the student.
And I also think because that there's a lot of health disparities in the Black community or just communities of colors and stuff like that, I think that, you know, sometimes people are looking for other resources to deal with, let's say, illnesses or something that they're going through. And knowing that if there's only a few resources, but it doesn't resonate with them, then it makes it very limited. And that does cause a huge impact.
Okay, so what I wanted to say is taking it one step further, because we're talking about the decolonization of our wellness space, I'll say that the impact of racism and colonization has essentially told, again, our communities that white is better. I'll give you an example. When my partner and I we're thinking about going to see not a psychiatrist, but actually let's say a psychiatrist, right? And automatically we thought, oh, well, you know what? There's a list of, you know, Black businesses, and so Black psychiatrists and Black counselors to see and everything else. And automatically I thought, oh gosh, I cannot go see one from Cameroon. I'm from Cameroon, by the way. I cannot go see one from Cameroon because I have a feeling that we're going to bump into the same circles. You know, we're going to bump into other circles and everything else. And then you realize that even you yourself as a Black person, you have biases against actual professionals. Why would I not want to go see a Cameroonian person? This is a professional psychiatrist who obviously is you know, has done actual studies for their position, has made an oath to, you know, client professional secrecy, et cetera, So I really do ask myself, where is my bias coming from, where I automatically think that if I'm going to see a psychiatrist, and I don't think I'm using the right word, there's another one, it's escaping my mind, but if I'm going to see a psychiatrist, I automatically have to go see a white one, supposedly because I'm biased, thinking that the Black one is not going to be enough. And so I think that that also is the way that we need to change the way our own people view their own leaders, where no, this Black person, regardless of where they're from, is going to be a professional. That's literally what they're trained for. Why should the psychiatrist from Cameroon be any less professional than a white Canadian one? And so these are the kind of biases that I think we also need to work on and explain to our communities that it has nothing to do with where they're from, be it your own home country or some other home country. It has to do with how they move as professionals. And that also ties back to what we said, where we said that, you know, people from our very own communities as leaders of their profession have to work extra hard just to prove themselves in the name of, well, everybody's so used to going to see a white doctor, for instance, that Black doctor now needs to, you know, no, I swear I'm just as good as that one. I'm just as good as that one. And, you know, you need 50,000 referrals just to, you know, just to prove yourself. So that to me is how racism definitely affects the wellness space for the people attending, where even they themselves look at, they look at me and they think, oh, she's just doing this for fun. Maybe she doesn't know any more than her white counterpart. And you're thinking, but why? Well, because you're Black. You're from Cameroon. How would you know? So, well, this other person didn't do their studies in India either. And it's just that to me is what, yeah.
I'd just like to jump on that quickly and say, you spoke to it too, but really acknowledging whether it's colorism or just our own distrust of ourselves and each other because of colonialism. And so really for people of color, for Black women, but for people of color in general, and then also too for the wider community, acknowledging that there is always bias working, behind the scenes, whether you're a person of color or not. And oftentimes colonialism has— that's why open runs might be better for $20. Has continued to empower people to maintain the positions that they have ultimately. And I guess I'll kind of briefly tell a story. Doing what I do, it's not, especially 5 years ago when I started to kind of bring my work into like into spaces, into like event spaces, and ended up, working out of a yoga studio, which I have to say I was really blessed at the time, because, to be doing astrology, once a month at a workshop, like, in that sort of format wasn't very common. Even in that experience, I had a great offering, and was asked by one of the leaders, or one of the yoga teachers, if we could combine my offering into something that she was doing, and thereby what felt like to me taking away this opportunity that I had built and cultivated and created, because I felt like she saw it as an opportunity for her. Instead of when I had suggested maybe we could create something together, but I could still have this opportunity, I felt like she was offended and therefore never came back to my workshops, even though I was, being offered this space. So that would be a way. And then lastly, to say that ensuring that as whether it's like traditional health and wellness, or spiritual, or sort of the stuff that I do, is empowering people of color, specifically Black women, to be the experts in their own experience, in their own body and mind, whether we're Black or white or whatever our background is.
Yeah, completely agreed with those points. So I just want to start off by saying thank you to Kathy for bringing that up, because I think that's a critical part of decolonizing wellness, right? Is understanding how deep-rooted racism goes, to the point where you yourself think are biased towards your own people, right? And a lot of people, like, we'll see even like these high level like celebrities or big figures saying things against their own people, and a lot of us will say, how could they do that? But when you really take a chance to think about it, it goes back to, this is what happened when we were colonized, right? That like the reason why it worked so well is because we were able to kind of see, we weren't able to see our own value, because that was diminished from, like, that was taken away from us. So it's a really important point. But Sheena, I also really love what you said. I really love the positive spin that you're taking on how, this is our reality, but how do we start to move forward from that? So I love that. I just want to pass the mic to any other panelists who want to speak further on this. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next topic. Perfect. All right. So that was kind of the idea of racism and discrimination. So the next topic that we'll be getting into as part of this discussion is diversity and inclusion in health and wellness. And before we get into that, I actually do just want to say welcome to everybody who just joined. I think Beatrice has been letting everybody in, but yeah, we did. I think the link kind of it got, but it's okay. Technology, yeah, technology will do what it wants to do. But thank you all for coming. We're so happy to see all of your beautiful faces. The 26 people in this call, love this. So just to kind of reiterate, we're just having discussions. We've got a bunch of questions here. If you have any additional questions that you would like to ask, please feel free to leave them in the chat. We will be leaving about 10 to 12 minutes afterwards to go through any additional questions. And even though, I'm just seeing all the beautiful comments, thank you guys. But even though the last thing I wanted to say is, even though this call is formally scheduled from 7 to 8:30, a few of us will be sticking around until 9 p.m. So if we don't get through everything, we will kind of be talking about that afterwards. So if you have free time this evening, feel free to stay till 9. And last but not least, if you did, for the parts that you did miss, it will be posted to the Women of Color Remake Wellness website. So it's not forever gone. So moving on, we'll be going on to the next topic, which is diversity and inclusion in health and wellness. So the first question that I have here for our panelists for this topic is, why is there a diversity issue in the health and wellness community?
Just for kicks, I'll start. I'll say it starts off with what we actually talked about earlier. For Ottawa specifically, it has to do with one, affordability of classes. So again, I'm speaking from a Black woman's perspective. So are the classes affordable? What is the target audience for the studio? So if you're targeting university students, your price package will be very different. If you're targeting working class people, again, very different price packaging. If you're targeting older folks heading towards retirement, your classes will have very different names. So, you know, a power class does not sound, I mean, I'm not saying that there are not folks that are over 60 that do power classes, but that speaks to a very specific demographic. And it's an age group demographic, it's a fitness type demographic. So that's also one reason. Another one is just not seeing yourself there. I'll say that I'm not here to name names, but everybody knows exactly where I'm coming from, what studio I'm talking about. If you don't, awesome. So I went to this studio for several years and I love it. I really do. I really did like the vibe over there. I probably was, as usual, the only Black chick there, and that was fine. It's just you realize very quickly that you're probably not as fun as you thought, because when you see another Black chick coming to class, you have this immediate urge. Like I'm talking about, it's immediate urge to just, you know, girl, I see you, you're here. Oh my God. And I mean, there's no real reason why I should be talking to this person. I mean, just let her be. But you know, she's there changing in the change room, you know, her bum half out there. And you really just want to go, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that you're here. You know, so there's also just not seeing yourself in that space and just not really feeling like you need to be in that space if you're the only one. And a lot of folks don't seem to understand that. And I had a conversation last year about diversity and inclusion with a white yoga teacher that I like and admire. And I said to her, when was the last time you were the only one? You tell me. And then when you are the only one, the only white person in this space, then tell me what it feels like. Because in as much as I'm comfortable, I can absolutely understand not being comfortable, being the only one all the time. And just earlier we talked about what it means being the only one. It means that you have to be your best, or at least you feel the pressure. It's unintentional, but you feel the pressure of being at your best. So say, you know, you get into class, it's hot yoga, you're tired, but all of a sudden you don't, the self-consciousness, because that's how you were raised, because that's what colonialism told you, because that's how your immigrant parents raised you. And again, speaking from my experience, you have to be at your best. And so, you know, if I was tired and the teacher said, hey, be in Shavasana and child's pose all class, all of a sudden I'm the only one in 52. So no, I'm gonna struggle through, and that's counter yoga, I get that. But it's that pressure of, well, you need to do your best, you need to this, you need to that. And so some folks just choose to not do that. There are yoga classes available online. There are yoga classes available in safe spaces where it's Black women only or BIPoC only. And so that to me is one of the reasons why we don't see anybody there. And the last thing I have to say is my experience being amongst only Black folks. I went back home to Cameroon to teach, was it last year or 2 years ago? And there is nothing, I'm talking about nothing that will compare to the feeling of relief, the feeling of, gosh, where has this space been all this time? Just teaching your peers, women that look like you. I mean, these are women that are my mother's age that were looking at me for actual guidance. And I thought, wow, I really know that much. I must really know that much then. And I've never felt like this in Ottawa, ever. Because I always feel that I'm one of 50,000 options, because I always feel that I'm not, I almost feel that people attend my classes because, they want to get a taste of a Black teacher and not necessarily because they think I'm good at what I do, or, to support me because they're my friends, because they're my family. But in Cameroon, it literally felt like, no, this chick must know it all. I am here not because of her ethnicity, not because she's teaching, yoga with African poetry, because, we're trying to get a taste of it, because we've been guilted into it. It's because she knows. And there has been nothing to compare to that since. So that's all I have to say for now.
Kathy, it's funny that you bring that up about that feeling that you feel when you walk into a studio, or you just walk into maybe an area that you don't see a person of color there, and you see them and you're just like, wow, like that feeling. I feel like a lot of people of color feel that, and they're just, it's a magical feeling. Like it's so different. But just kind of off of what you were saying, the lack of accommodation is a huge factor. I think of, when you think of certain communities in Ottawa, people don't really necessarily know that there might be a lack of resources there, and that does affect a community to be able to reach out, to be able to practice their wellness rituals. And another part, which is really sad to think about it, is that a lot of communities and a lot of backgrounds have different ways of practicing their own health and wellness. And that has been very, I guess you could say, shunned upon. Like you can't see it. It's only mainly white, I guess, practices sometimes that you see. And with that, it's very difficult for a different community or someone of color.
The skirt also is amazing because they have fucking practice.
To come out and, sorry, I got distracted, to come out and talk about what makes them well, and to be able to reach out and
yeah, it is. That's kind of nice. I like it. Everyone out here switching. Everyone has their umbrellas up now.
Yeah, that's basically what I wanted to say.
I'll just jump in after you. I just want to reiterate, I want to be the third person to kind of like stick it in and say, I have a really close friend. I would call her like a sister, and not a Black woman, she's Filipino. And we're parallel in this social justice path. And she had said she had gone to like a unconscious bias, training or conversation, maybe about 2 years ago. And she said that she didn't realize that until that event, that when she goes into a space, she looks around for any other person of color, whether they're Asian or Black or whatever, any other person of color.
Yeah.
And so there is this joy and a little bit of relief that happens when you do see just someone that's an other, and and also just to kind of, speak to why I think the issue perpetuates itself is because for so many reasons, but one as an example comes to mind is if someone invites me to something, or for example, someone reached out and was like, hey, would you be interested in partnering to, for our swimsuit stuff or whatever? And I would be happy to. I love bathing suits. I love going to the beach. Like, let me check out your website, and scroll and scroll and scroll, and there's no person of color there. Or maybe there's like someone that could be a person of color, but there's no definitive person that I could say, I can see myself in you. And so if I can't see myself in whatever it is that you're offering, I can find me somewhere else. And that's what I'd like to say to that piece.
Okay. I definitely resonate with what everybody has said. I know we've definitely touched on different areas of health and wellness. I think the same falls in mental health too. A lot of it comes to affordability is what I notice here in the United States is we have all these different resources, but not many people of quality and of color look like you. And I think those are two important things, not just of color, but of quality, because that the resources can be like not that great, and people are giving their half best, and it's not great. So it's really like, are you giving quality resources to people in need? And I think that's so important, is to be able to offer services, like whether that's yoga or Reiki or mental health, like having the affordability to do these things. And for me, I've always had that challenging aspect because I was trained in yoga in Thailand, where this is for free. And in America, I've never taught at a yoga studio for this specific reason that I don't believe to charge for yoga. I have a really hard time with it because I see it as like a spiritual practice, or like we're focusing on health and wellness, and like this is a community. Like that's how I learned. I just see it as like I should offer this to you because you need it. And I want to help you, versus here in America, it's like all these yoga studios everywhere that's like $25 a class, or like, people can't afford this, and it's a workout. It's not really like spiritual wellness practice. It's just like, hey, let's get our workout on using this Eastern practice. Like we're trying to incorporate what we think is spirituality or health and wellness, but it's really just our take on, let's do this really quick for quick results. Like it's all about like results, cause and effect. So I feel like that's always been my challenge. And I try to do things like I've taught a lot of yoga for free, and a lot of yoga to the Black community, just because I want to help them and educate them in ways so that they're more aware that like yoga can be utilized in different aspects. Like I know some Black people are weary about, are we practicing Hinduism? And I'm like, no, we don't have to do that if that's not what you want to do. We can just mind-body connection. So it's all in what you want to. You can do Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever you want to. I'm just going to teach you the mind-body connection, and you can utilize it in whatever way is important for you as a person. So I think that's important. There's a lack of knowledge. So really incorporating the knowledge and helping educate the community about different ways of wellness, not just what they've been told is wellness, but different ways that you can utilize it, and people that are willing to provide it without the focus as business. That's the hard time I have with this, just the business focus all the time, really focusing on the person and not the business.
I have two things to add to what you said. The first one is, and I've been pondering this for literally 2 weeks. The first one is the business of yoga. And you mentioned that you're doing, you've been teaching yoga for free, which is great. And again, we're putting this in the matrix of how yoga is being taught in North America. And what I'm finding, what I've actually come to the realization is that the system just doesn't work for us.
Yeah. That's
And
crazy.
we
Babe.
all,
Look at the comparison. Look back there and then look.
this person is intentional. Anyways, so yoga, the yoga teaching system, be it how you become a teacher, be it how you stay a student in a studio, all these things do not work for people of color. And there's a very simple reason, is exactly as you said, because what we are trying to make of yoga, even just the asanas, so just these physical practice, what we're trying to make it, we're working it on a system that actually is like a gym. Our studios are operating like gyms. Our studios are operating to become hopefully, I mean, in their minds, in the back of their heads, to become multi-million organizations that have several studios in several places, which is literally the system of a gym. And so our studios in general have sort of put aside the social community aspect of yoga and just taken on the more capitalist version of it, which is how gyms operate. The reason why your gym membership could cost you as little as $60 is because they have, it's like McDonald's. They have 50 places all around, and that's why they can afford it. Our studios, our yoga studios in general, operate the same way. What the pandemic has done is shifted everything online and sort of woken us up to the fact that, well, your class can truly not cost $25 online. People are not going to pay for that. What does that mean? It means that now you have to work with a more social aspect of it, the more social community aspect of it, where you try to consider people's affordability or how they can afford it. And now we're talking sliding scales. And sliding scales for a kind of, as you had said, Elise, a kind of spiritual type of work is where I do personally think we should be headed as a collective, as a, as a people that, that like to either work or live in that space. Doing it for free in North America is a disservice to oneself. There are free YouTube videos. If that person is asking for a one-on-one or a person-to-person connection, it is the time that you took to drive over there. It is the time that you took to be there early so that you could welcome that person to the space. It is the time that you're taking to stay there after class, to ask for feedback, to tell them, how great they were, give them feedback on their own practice and they exchanging with you. That a YouTube video will never do that for you. And that is your time and your value. And there's no reason why we should keep on doing this for free when there's such a thing as a sliding scale, which could actually help people that typically wouldn't be able to afford a 25 drop-in class, be able to afford a $9 class because that's literally all they can afford, or $8 or whatever that minimal value is. And then you can slide all the way to, the person who makes $100K a year, who actually could probably afford a $50 class with you just because, they want to support you. So that was the one thing, and I forgot the second thing because I talk a lot, but thank you for hearing me out.
I would agree with you. I think that my free thought process is just wanting to help people, and just in the helping profession definitely is it just naturally comes to me. But the sliding scale, I think, is very important. I think that people can definitely do that. My background class is something called Kunga Yoga, which is a sliding scale fee. So that means that you give what you can afford. So I definitely agree, and it focuses on that community aspect. That's a personal issue with myself that I definitely have to work on. But I think that for the community and for the Black community and people of color, that would really resonate with them, to be able to feel like I can attend this class and I can come with what I have. In a lot of acupuncture is do that here. So they do have that sliding scale fee where it's like you have the minimum amount, and that may be like $10, and then you can go up to a certain amount. And it is that community aspect, and I found that to be very helpful for people that can't afford that capitalistic mindset of like $50 for a yoga class or $100 for acupuncture. You know, they can still get the services and they can still afford it, because I believe that wellness is universal and everybody should be able to experience that, no matter what their income and their place in life is. So having that available to them, I think, is super important. So I really appreciate your thought process behind that.
All right. I love all of this conversation that's happening. And I think it's just really clear that the issue of diversity and inclusion in the wellness space, it's a really deep topic. It's funny because there was a point in my life where I was also a little bit unsure. I was like, why is there this lack of, inclusion and diversity? And I remember my first thing was, oh, it must be the money. But it goes so much deeper than that, right? There's so many different aspects, and like so many of them have been hit on. And I've read a lot of articles on it, and it kind of goes to these topics, right? There's the fact that it is very expensive. Yes. There's the fact that there's the spirituality perspective, right? From a lot of different cultures. Like I know in the Black community, if we practice Christianity, there's an idea that, oh, like, are we going against Christianity by practicing that? That's a huge misconception that exists that I think is really important, right? And for me, I also realized there was a general just lack of understanding, right? Because when you look at it, and I think that kind of ties into the way it's presented in the West as a workout activity, right? And I think then if we, like a lot of the conversations and the podcasts that I listen to from voices in the South Asian community, it's almost an off-putting thing where it's, you see something that has roots in your own culture, but that's being like touted as this like workout activity when really there's a deep history behind it. So I think there's so many different aspects to it, and I think we're touching on all of it. And I also think with respect to the payment, there's so many different schools of thought on it too. But I think it's really important for us to have those discussions. And I think something that's been really interesting to me is the disparity between where the money goes in the yoga industry, right? Because I find yoga teachers, especially those yoga teachers of color, naturally you're a giving person, right? And you want to give towards these communities. But I think a really big issue is that a lot of the money is up in the organizations up there. So I find that really interesting. But anyway, I did want to see, does anybody else on the panel have any other thoughts on this topic, or are we okay to move on to the next question?
I'll just briefly speak to some.
Yes, for sure.
Kind of, I think, kind of spoken to. But I just want to speak about the cult, like the fact that business is ultimately a culture of control. It has to be. It has to be if you want to be able to hit margins and profits and all of that. And it's something that I can say that I'm working on too, because of one, my privilege of actually having a physical space, but then two, knowing my own accessibility needs, and knowing that it's not just me, so other people within my community or communities external to mine, knowing that accessibility, one, being cost, two, being mobility and all of that, but then also knowing that at the end of the day, for me to be able to sustain this space so I can continue to offer the healing work that I do, there does have to be a little bit of, if I want to say control, but I am very mindful of offering what I can, sliding scales included, to people, like, and the way I've done it, and it's still something that I'm trying to mold and morph, but to the Black community, then to people of color, Indigenous and people of color, and then to the wider community, and then having sliding scales even within that. And again, back to that piece of control, I do think that the diversity piece, because everybody wants to maintain their livelihood, And we don't want to take away from anyone else's livelihood, but we need to make sure that we are all, as a people, as like a human race, if you want to say that way, that we're ultimately looking out for another person, and that's not just the people that look like us. And and I say that with the consciousness of that control piece. Around business and being intentionally inclusive to bring in people that may not have a piece of that control.
So I just wanted to add, so we mentioned, so there's the business of yoga, and we're talking about what's not bringing, why our community, not, again, speaking from the Black community, why our community is not joining. Chongo mentioned a very good point about what your faith is and what you're doing when you're going into yoga. There was a conversation earlier with Elise where Elise was mentioning that a lot of the focus in our yoga studios in general, again, being very general, not pointing at anyone in particular, is that we're focusing specifically on the asanas, on the physical practice of yoga. And so the physical practice of yoga, then depending on what again your target audience is, you will make it sound like a fitness class. So it's the studios that they have hardcore yoga. What does that mean? But people attend and people love it, and anybody that enjoys being tortured into 5-minute planks they just absolutely adhere to it, and great and good for them. What I'm trying to get at is, in my community, I'll speak from my mom. My mom is a Christian woman who, very much in her beliefs, and I am a Christian person. I don't necessarily practice them as she does, but there's two things as to why she's never taken one of my classes, no matter how much I've told her that it's accessible to her. One, she assumes that she will turn into a pretzel, that she has to turn into a pretzel, that she has to do, crazy back bends. She's seen me do, a forearm stand, and that was just the end of it. She will tell all her friends about it, but will never join. Two, it seems to, when you're chanting Om, when you're in Ashtanga, for instance, before you start class, there is a chant. And when you finish class, there is a chant. It's not knowing what that chant is. What are they saying? It's not knowing what they're saying. It's not knowing what Om means. It's not knowing what Shanti means. It's people just doing mudras without knowing what it's about. And so it's the folks that are doing it and not knowing why they're doing it. And it's the folks that are seeing it and just thinking, you know what, this is against my religion, this is against my faith. And so there's a lack of education, and again, speaking from the Black community, there's a lack of education in the Black community. There's not just Christians in the Black community. There's people that are just generally spiritual. There's Muslims. There's Hindus. There's all sorts. It's just the way the way the West has packaged yoga ultimately means that for, say, a Christian woman like me, you would think you would have to just be the reject of your church, because obviously that cannot happen there. And it's only in the recent years that I've realized that my church, for instance, for kids has embodied the two together, because they've understood that, well, you know what, yoga can also just be a physical practice, but that we can tie in our faith and go along with it for mindfulness. And so it's the concept of mindfulness that we very often forget when it comes to yoga, where yes, you can be doing the asanas, but are you being mindful? Yes, you can be doing a handstand, but are you being mindful of your movement, with your breath, with where you are? When you're done with that asana, when you go home, when you see people, what are you doing with that energy that you've transferred up and down, in and out in your mat? What are you doing when you move outside of that? So our community, my community anyway, seems to be very focused on the fact that, well, you said Om. Do you know what that means though? You know, you said Shanti, what are you chanting? Well, okay, sure, ask me. Or maybe we need to do more to explain that just to get our communities to get it. And it all, again, has to do with how we're packaging it. You were talking about how, you know, folks, just this week, I took one class with someone who I'm sure is from India. And that was like, oh, I mean, I was sitting in there and going, that's not how the flow goes. And I thought, well, no, that is how her practice goes. And the fact that that's how you've been doing it at your hot yoga studios means absolutely nothing. Open your mind to the fact that there are different branches of yoga, there's different ways of practicing it, and that's what we need to relate to our communities. Relate to our communities that there's not just power yoga, there's not just hot yoga, there's not just turn into a pretzel, do a handstand yoga. There's so much more. And you can just be sitting down and being mindful, meditating. That is the yoga.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the idea that there's a lack of understanding that there can be differences within one practice or one thing. So when I think of that, I think of meditating. You can meditate and you can pray. It still can be meditating. So yeah, that needs to change.
Sorry, I resonate with both of you guys. It just really spoke to me. My friend is here listening to me, and she's like, Kathy, she's you. She's like you. So, because I preach this every day, I have clients come in because I do yoga with children. And I work with a primary, I'm in the South of the United States, so primarily like Christian population. I'm Christian, but more like faith-based and spiritual than like the religious practice. So I get a lot of like, we don't want you to do any of that meditating. We don't want you to do like, are you oming? And like, is that Hinduism? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it's not, it's visualization. I'm retraining your neural pathways is what meditation is. So I'm really helping with your neural pathways, helping coping skills, and just you being aware of your behavior and your feelings and all of that stuff. And if you understood yoga, you would understand and be more mindful. And a lot of the religion is just like boxed in. You know, the Western culture is just like, this is what you should do. More so you being open-minded with your spirituality, whatever that is, it doesn't matter what it is. But that yoga essentially is a mind-body connection. Whether you are a Buddhist or Hindu, or you don't believe in anything, you can still connect your mind and body, period. That's it. And you can change your neural pathways, period. As a mental health professional, I understand this, and I believe, I don't believe, I know this is possible because I've done it for 6 years, and I've seen it happen over and over again. So it's just like, I get frustrated because of the lack of education and the ignorance. I've been to Thailand, that's where I was trained. I know their practice. I've practiced Buddhism. To me, there's nothing wrong with that. I still practice Christianity or whatever that's supposed to mean. I'm a believer, whatever. But I understand Buddhism. I understand Hinduism. I understand Christianity. And I also understand Islam. So all of that, I understand all of them. And I respect whatever resonates with you. And I utilize that to help you as a person. And I think that's the hard, with America, I can say that's the hard part. Is like we continuously say, it's a workout or it's closed-minded. They're very, very closed-minded. The chants are actually very positive. Like whatever, like if you know what it means, it's like, wow, you're talking about hope. And you're talking about peace and kindness, but because it's a chant, you don't understand. Well, let's look in the Bible, they do the same thing, but whatever, I can go on and sorry, this is something I do all the time, so it just frustrates me with people. So it's just it's ignorance, and to educate people about being open-minded, and to see somebody like them is important. To see somebody that understands everything, whether they are whatever they are, that you can do this, and this can help your health, this can help your body, this can help your mind, is so important. And we support you in your faith and spirituality, whatever that may be. Sorry for my little tantrum.
No, no, and I hear you. Like I said, I've tried a few yoga types of practices. So the first time I went to Ashtanga, I got my ass kicked, forgive my language. I literally got it got handed to me. And not because it's a difficult practice, but because it's a very slow practice. And, I had been, at the time I was, power flow Kathy, just, all. And anyway, so I get to class and behold, they're chanting. And like I said, I'm not a saint. So the first thing that I, internally clutch my pearls and just, what are we chanting here? Why are we chanting this and what does that mean? And the only way that I was able to move past that was essentially to ask someone to give me the transcript of what it means in English. So I read what it means in English and but maybe one chant, one part of it I jive with, the other one I don't. And I'm respectful of other people's faiths. I'm respectful of other people's beliefs, whether or not it jives with me or not, as long as it's respectful of other human beings. And so what I do is when they chant, I say the Lord's Prayer. It takes just about as long. You time it and you're like, yep, we're good. Okay, starts. Ekam, Ekam, inhale, Dwe, exhale. And off we go. And, and we're connecting with our breaths. I'm getting good vibes, good energies from the people in the room. And, you end the class and it really, truly did not matter what your spiritual background was. You feel good. You've moved your body, you've sweated, and you maybe you didn't do XYZ pose because your body is not moving that way. And that's another part that, again, the whole packaging of yoga, it's this assumption that you need to do everything. I walked into a class once, and a hot yoga class, and the teacher very kindly said, feel free to stay in child's pose if you need to. And this lady, I'm talking about, it was a 1-hour class. At minute 5, she got into child's pose. Minute 6, she got into Shavasana and stayed there the whole class. And I looked at her, and every time I looked at her, I felt like clapping, like, good for you for normalizing you taking care of you and meaning it. And so there's this concept of, maybe we as teachers, as leaders of our communities, we also need to do more to actually express the fact that whether you're at a beginner's class, you're at a, get turned into a pretzel class, if it is your body, it is your body, it is your, you are the best teacher. I have a teacher who once said, you know the issues in your tissues. And making people understand that that is a lot more important than, Kathy telling you to go into that 5th warrior, warrior 3 that you absolutely detest. It's just, you can just not do it and I will take no offense to it. Or maybe just, our teachers needing to lay their egos aside, or us being more informative about what it is that we want our communities to know, but just repackaging yoga in such a way that the communities that are frightened to enter, and again, speaking from the yoga perspective, I know that Sheena, for instance, does Reiki, and I can say, for instance, that up until, say, 3 weeks ago, three weeks ago, maybe a month, that was not something I necessarily jived with, and that's perfectly fine. It's just that somebody explained it to me, and all of a sudden, okay, sure, it's not witchcraft. We're not all going to be damned to, we're not all going to just be, tossed in, in hellfire and that's it. It's, I really sat there and it was explained to me, and, astrology, for instance, and tarot. And I sat there and someone gave me a card and said, what does that card say to you? Here's a little booklet. What comes to your mind? And that was very powerful. And these are things that I never would have done had someone, as a matter of fact, had someone of color not brought it to me. Because to me, as Sheena actually said, again, forgive my language, but that's how it comes out, that's some white people shit. And that's how most of our people in our communities think about it. It's some white people shit. But why is it? Because they don't see enough of us practicing it? because it's not explained. So let's say the major white accounts have not spent enough time explaining that it is accessible to literally everyone, that you, the church going every Sunday, every other day of the week, can do this. And this is not a diss to Christians. I'm just saying because I'm one, so I relate to it better. It just means you can dabble with other things without it taking away from who and what you pray to, if you do. And it's not some white people shit. It's just for it to not be some white people shit. We need to be, the black, black teachers, black instructors and everything need to be given a chance to shine. And it's not happening if we're constantly in a system that puts the same 30 yoga teachers in the 10 yoga studios and they're on rotation there all the time. It cannot happen. It will never happen. So yeah, I could go on forever.
Amazing. Do any other panelists have anything to add to this amazing conversation that's happening?
Just quickly, I just want to say that Kathy was banging on with what she said, but definitely it could be seen throughout all health and wellness, which is amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's definitely this cycle, right, that I keep seeing. It's that the community doesn't really, there's not a full understanding of the benefits, but then at the same time, to understand the benefits, you also have to see it as not just a white people thing. But then how can you do that if in the industry we're not hiring and giving opportunities to a diverse array of teachers from these communities instead of just the token ones, right? So it's just this perpetuating system of how are you going to see if there's so few people to look at, but then are those people that exist, are they seeing themselves? It's just a whole thing. But the next question that we kind of have is, okay, so we're talking about the health and wellness community, the fact that there's a diversity issue clearly. So what role does the health and wellness industry have in decolonizing wellness? We've kind of talked about this, but what can the industry specifically do? What do you guys think about that?
Definitely gonna jump in. Definitely think that it starts, I would have to say it starts with ourselves. That's why I do the self-development work that I do, to really understand the beliefs that we have, because how do we change any sort of, if we feel it, we need to change, or I mean, we're always evolving. And so when I say change, I really mean evolve. And how do we intentionally evolve, rather than just letting ourselves get swept up by whatever our passion is, and being intentional with knowing, I mean, to me, my understanding is that spirituality is inclusivity, ultimately. So what does that mean? That means spirituality for me includes my sadness and includes my joy. It's the full experience. It's anger, and it's happiness. And so in saying that, knowing that anything that I have to do will start with me. And so any work that anyone else has to do has to start with them. And so committing to that work, and knowing that even when you think that you know something, that's the point where you're no, we have to start back at the beginning, because there's so much more that you don't know and so much more that you haven't accessed. And so, of course, I would have to say the most important thing, I think, for everyone, Black people included too, is to address their own relationship to colonization. Whether that is, as an example, I'm not necessarily I'm adjacent to the yoga community, but I know that, for example, non-compete clauses are a thing, particularly, I guess, maybe in the Toronto region. And to me, that is a colonial practice, because I have been told, I'm aware that certain, and it, of course, is to protect your business. But I'm of the belief that one person, one community, one organization cannot serve the entire world, and nor do you want to. And so in saying that, if you happen to have a class at the same time, or if you're offering a similar offering, that doesn't mean that you're taking away from someone else. Maybe that person can't attend because it's the morning or because it's the evening, or, you know, whatever it is that you're offering, and maybe they can attend and maybe they can't. But ultimately not making it about you, and just being able to, any type of leader will always consistently bring it back to themselves and what it is that they have to do. So like that is the most important thing, I would say. And of course, unconscious bias training, I have to put that in. I've been telling like all of my people, that is where we can start. Yeah.
It's exactly what I was going to mention too, Sheena, about unpacking your biases that you have, especially as a business owner. You have to be able to represent your company. So that does start with unpacking your biases and making sure that you're educated and aware so you can be able to spread correct knowledge.
I agree with both of you. Definitely what you said about the non-compete really resonated. Not even thinking that's like a colonization like mindset, but as you're in business, you start to learn more the abundance mindset, where everybody has their own purpose and everybody will have their own type of tribe and people to come to them. So you're not operating that scarcity mindset. So you're afraid of something happening all the time. Everybody is going to reach a certain person. Like, you're not going to be right for a whole type of population. You're going to be right for your population. And once you realize that, and you understand like what your purpose and value, calling, whatever you want to call it, you focus on that and you can reach that population and educate them. And that's not normal. Like, that's not normalized. It's very like a different mindset. But when you evolve, like you said, or reaching your higher calling, evolving and keep going, you realize that abundance is a mindset for all areas, not just business, but all areas in life. And when you operate on that scarcity, you're holding yourself back. And you're also holding other people back, and you're not a leader. So a leader doesn't hold somebody back that's going to be valued in a different area. So if I realize that you are no longer operating at your highest potential with me in a business and you can benefit on your own, then I'm going to push you to do your best on your own. But we're so afraid of people getting clients or taking my people or whatever the case may be, that we don't really help people. And that's that spirituality of helping all people and allowing to do their calling or being their best self.
I just wanted to mention, so there's in terms of what can we, either as studios, as teachers, as what can we do better? I remember talking to someone last week, and it occurred to me that if we focused on the minority groups, we would probably be doing better, as, again, speaking from the Ottawa yoga community. So if studios or individuals would actually, again, remember, based on what Elise was saying, if we would remember that yoga truly is a mind-body connection, we would probably do more work within communities. We're talking about, okay, well, what can a studio, especially the renowned ones, what can a studio do? I really do think that studios could probably be more engaged with the actual communities, and not just, the people that attend their classes already by doing little functions for them, but also the people that truly do not attend. So focusing on minorities would mean something like encouraging their teachers with pay, because you can't afford it, encouraging their teachers to go teach at, I don't know, a shelter or somewhere that they're comfortable with. So here I am, Kathy, I go teach at, what's the name? The Cultural Arts Studio, which is an Afrocentric type place. They have dance, they have other activities. So I go teach over there. somebody explains to me why, say, one of the big studios in Ottawa couldn't sponsor one of their regular teachers to go teach over there and draw attention to that crowd. You know, yes, I know that they do karma classes. Karma classes are great because, yes, I think the money goes to different charities, and that's good, but that's on the dime of the students attending. I'm saying that it's great that you're doing this on the students' dime. I think that the studios should now come to the community. Like I said, I had a conversation with a white yoga teacher last year about diversity and inclusion. And I asked, and she said, well, how can I bring, and she's a great teacher, like seriously, she's amazing. I would follow her across the earth if it wasn't for the fact that I live in Gatineau. You know, and, you know, she was saying, well, how can I bring my practice to more people? I said, well, say for instance, have you ever called the Ethiopian Community Center? I'm not saying that's a real title, but let's say, have you called them and said you wanted to teach there, that you have an offering there? All of a sudden she hesitated. And I said, well, why wouldn't you teach there? Oh, well, yeah, but that, you know, I'd be the only white person. I don't think I'd integrate. And I had to scoff and I said, that's literally what I do every day. How are you different? You know, why is it that I'm so easily able to integrate the white culture, whatever that means, but then somehow you're telling me about how it might be different for you? No, it won't. You're a human being. You're a human being. You have, you know, I think she has what, 10, 15 years of experience. You will know how to adapt it to different bodies, I hope. And then it might also shift your mind on how it is that you do teach. Just yesterday, I think, what's her name? Oof, Chanel. I have this girl crush on Chanel. She doesn't even know. So Chanel posted about how the queuing is generally focused on able bodies, and not just able bodies, but thin bodies. And it occurred to me, oh, shoot, I think that's how I queue. Maybe I should rethink it. Do you think that I wouldn't benefit from going to, say, teach at a place, you know, so she teaches body positive classes. So I think the people in some of her classes, very specific classes, are generally bigger women or bigger people in general. And would I not benefit from going there? I'd be the only skinny chick. I'm not skinny, but I'd be the only slim chick. But I think I would benefit. So the same way I think that studios would benefit from actually trying to immerse themselves into spaces where they're less comfortable with. It's too easy to, you know, here's some money that the students generated by coming to our karma classes. And the students are not going there because they're donating to the, you know, to the puppy field or, you know, disenfranchised cats in Ottawa. They're just going there because it's cheaper. That is a simple reason why people are going there. People don't really know what the charity is. They're going there because it's cheaper, it's more affordable. It's all the University of Ottawa and Carleton students going there. So how can we do better? Immerse ourselves in spaces that we're not used to. And that's a call to teachers, it's a call to students, it's a call to, to everyone to just, okay, well, you know, you've never been there before. I'm quite sure you could benefit from that. And it's the studios needing to support the teachers to do that work on their own dime. You can't tell me also you've hired, you know, recently, 3 of the major studios hired this one Black chick that I, again, have a girl crush on. And I was really happy for her. Again, we're probably gonna have a discussion in 6 months about, is she the token Black chick now? What has the studio actually done to integrate the community, let's say again, the Black community? What, hired her? That's not enough. What they need to do is, say, reach out to directly, by the way, I don't understand why people need fancy channels. Reach out directly to communities that are always trying to add yoga to their offerings. And then pay a teacher that is not necessarily their token Black chick to go teach over there. That to me is a solution that just seems very radical, but I really just, you know, there are all sorts of education out there, you know, to teach in shelters, to teach in this, to teach in just communities that truly need it. And studios could stand behind and pay a teacher to do that. And not just their person who is a member of that community, not just that, but just provide that experience for everybody to just be a little more well-rounded in their understanding of what other human beings deal with on a day-to-day. I'll stop there.
I am quickly going to interject to say that our session time is formally over, but as mentioned earlier, we will be going until 9 p.m. I know a few people may have to drop off. So if you need to drop off now, the recording will be available, but otherwise, please feel free to stay. We'll continue the conversation, and thank you so much for that, Kathy. I will pass it back to the panelists just in case you want to add anything.
I think one thing I'll say to beyond Kathy, like just so fire, so many pieces that are like, yes, 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 thank you. And previous comments too. One thing, or a couple things I'd just like to add on beyond like the financial pieces that are really so significant, and the representation pieces that are so significant, is that I'm mindful that there is a lot of discomfort around saying that having the conversations. But there is an ease I will offer in that sometimes, I mean, if someone is being, prejudiced or racist, indirectly, directly, explicitly, non-explicitly in front of you, or you're privy to it, I hope that you would say something. But in the times that we don't have direct impact or whatnot, I want to impress the fact that most often people feel compelled to change or to evolve because they feel inspired by people using their voice, by people speaking out, by people being vulnerable, even if that's saying like, I have privilege and I don't know how to use it, but I'd like to start saying or speaking about it. And then just that little piece of you saying something or expressing something to the person that you could never even think is like listening. They are listening. So put yourself out there in a way that maybe other people don't feel comfortable enough to do. But as a leader, if you're a leader, you also need to lead with your voice and your being, and just how you show up in your communities where no one else is, maybe no one else would be privy to the conversations that you're having. And it's in those moments that you inspire people. And so in that, observing where you are and what you're saying and what messages like you could deliver, not necessarily intentionally, but just by being who you are and speaking your truth about who you are and what it is that you believe, instead of shying away from, oh, that feels uncomfortable, or I don't want to make this person feel bad. So observing, listening, and again, speaking to what your personal experience is and being willing to have those uncomfortable conversations, because that's how things change and evolve.
Wow, I love that. That hit me. That's wow. Yeah, we all need that reminder sometimes because it can be very nerve-wracking to go out and use our voices. So I hope that everybody can take something from that. The next question that I have for the group is, why does the wellness industry need to be involved in this discussion around diversity and inclusion?
Lashana, were you going ahead?
Yeah, sorry. I think, honestly, it's one of the simple answers is representation is important. We want to be able to see people that look like us in a room, whether it's a yoga studio or whether it's, we're trying to learn something new that benefits our health. That's all very important. But when there's been many cases that groups have been marginalized, it's very hard for people to feel comfortable and to go back into those spaces. So yeah, that's one thing that I think why it's important for sure.
I'd say because the wellness space, if they're going to operate in the same capitalist way that a gym operates, or a meat factory, or the Walmarts of the world, if they're trying to be the Walmarts of the world, Walmart is being held accountable for things that they do. And too long have we done the whole spiritual bypass on the wellness industry, because how do you quantify an OM? How do you quantify how someone feels? Well, you quantify by the fact that they paid for a class. And if they paid for a class, well, then you do need to show me numbers. You do need to show me where you stand when it comes to the racial divide. And that's literally what we saw on Instagram in the last few months, with all sorts of organizations coming up with, oh, Black Lives Matter, the black squares, the promises to do better and everything else. Why? Because it will eventually impact their money. You not posting, a business not posting a black square, I absolutely understand that it's, it was literally just posting a black square. If 10 people of their, if 10 people of their followers saw it, maybe just one person at least would have asked themselves a question of, oh, what's that about? And so they would have done something about it. So I'm a bit two ways about this whole, showing of solidarity. It's just, if you don't do it, what does that mean? What does that mean for the thousands of followers that you have? What does that mean for the thousands of clients that you have? Are you saying that you don't care? And then if you do it, well, is it genuine? Right? So the wellness industry needs to be involved, because it will eventually affect their dollars. We are in a total upheaval of the system, and I'm just praying that this wave carries on. I know that things like that do take time, so I'm more than willing to patiently wait. Let's check out in 6 months. Let's see in a year. Let's see what happens post-pandemic. Are we still all going to be putting those black squares? Are we still all going to be caring about Black lives, about non-white lives? Is that token black chick still going to be working at your studio? Is she going to report to her little black group that, oh gosh, that was hell that was hell on earth over there? What is going to happen? So it's, if every other industry is being held accountable for their diversity and inclusion, or their in lack of, it's finally about time that the wellness industry is being held accountable as well, because it's a multi-million-dollar type industry. It's almost too late. Like, why didn't somebody tell? Why haven't we been talking about this more? Or why hasn't more light not been shone on it? And I know that some folks have been talking about this for years. Why did it take a pandemic and, and so many people, dying on our screens for that to become a thing for the studios? And the reason why is because it's going to touch their dollars. It's going to touch their dollars. It's going to be the white people that do support those causes, whom those causes come to heart, them turning around and looking at the big Ottawa studios going, well, what did you say during that wave of uprising? And, oh, now I'm woke. So where are your teachers? Where are your teachers of color? I'm scrolling through your website. It's nowhere to be found. And that's a student who we all know that a bad experience is shared with 10 people. Good experience, 2 people max. So that person, that white person who finally has realized that the lack of diversity and inclusion really bothers them after all, is going to tell all their friends, and their friends are going to make decisions of whether or not they're going to attend. And that's why again, just repeating myself here, but that's why they need to care at the very least for their money. Whether they're doing it generally or not, we'll find out someday. But that's why they need to do something, because it will affect their dollar. That's it.
I'll just jump in. Could I just briefly ask you to ask the question again? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. So the question is, why does the wellness industry need to be involved in the conversation around diversity and inclusion?
Thank you. So it is important because whether it's yoga or spiritual health and wellness, like I'm in, or the traditional medical model, and going to your doctor, it is important because when you are seeking something from these spaces, whatever it is, something related to your health and wellness, that automatically puts you into a space of vulnerability, because you're having to seek something external to yourself. And it's not even like most often, it's not even like you're seeking support from someone that is close to you, someone that you can trust innately. It's you having to put yourself out there hoping that someone else will do their due diligence and put your best interest to the forefront. And if people in the health and wellness industry, in whatever form that takes, are not able to, or are simply unwilling to, because they feel that it's not their job, or they sometimes, because of their own experience, cannot even see things that may be someone's everyday reality. So speaking for me, I've gone through my own mental health, conditions and struggles and experiences. I self-harmed between the ages of 12 and 25, and I started going to therapy like 21 years ago, so when I was 17, and only in the past 5 years have I gotten to see a therapist of color, out of probably the 8 to 10 therapists that I've seen. And the trauma that I've experienced in seeking the support, I can't even explain to you what that does to someone when they are already in that space of need and seeking something, seeking the love and support and the nourishment and ultimately the health and wellness that they need. And so if you are in a position where someone's coming to you, whether you're a yoga teacher or mental health professional or whatever, and you can't see or support them in their fullness of their experience, that is the disservice and will continue to perpetuate the trauma that they've experienced. And so by intentionally incorporating diversity beyond words, beyond money, really embodying what that means, that is why it's important, so that we don't further perpetuate the trauma, the generational trauma that's there, the personal trauma that's there. It is I want to impress the responsibility upon everyone, that you have, whenever someone comes into your office or into your classroom, it's a responsibility that you have.
If I can actually just add on to that, because that resonated so much with me. This is a topic I explore a lot through my own platform, Anona Wellness. An experience that a lot of friends of mine, because I have a lot of friends who come from BIPoC immigrant communities, a lot of them, they'll finally, so, there's all these cultural barriers to wellness, right? Like this idea that we don't do it, it's not our thing, it's whatever. And then you finally get to that point where you're like, you know what? I'm going to try and do something about this. I'm going to go outside my comfort zone, really uncomfortable with this, but I'm going to go to that yoga studio, or I'm going to go to that therapist, or I'm going to do some sort of thing in the wellness industry to try to help myself because I have no other option. And then you go and you encounter somebody who truly doesn't understand you. And what's your conclusion? Oh, wellness isn't for me. And then you go your whole life thinking that's how your life has to be. When if you had encountered somebody who, one, looked like you, or had your or understands where you're coming from. Something as simple as, for me too, Sheena, like the first time I tried therapy, I was like, this isn't for me. Like, they don't understand. I can't just go and tell my dad about this. Like, this isn't how our culture works. But then later on, I had the luxury of having a Black therapist who just understood. But it's like, does it just have to be, and this kind of ties to what Kathy was saying, does it just have to be a Black therapist? Are there ways for even white practitioners to just be aware of certain things, you know, to just understand and not always pass it off to other people? So I think we need to care, because you don't, like, we're all in the wellness industry because we want to help people, right? But how are you're harming people by not understanding where they come from, and you're harming people by not having people who look like them. And all it takes is one bad experience to write something off forever. So it's like, we want to bring this to these communities because all of these communities deserve to be well. There's so many studies that show that the Black community suffers much more, they suffer from much more mental health, right? Like, it's just as a result of all of the traumas we go through, whether it's transgenerational or racial trauma or whatever. So there are communities who really could benefit from this. And by not having diversity and inclusion, and by these wellness practitioners not understanding these topics, you run the risk of harming them, just as Sheena said. So I just wanted to put that in there because it's something I'm personally very passionate about, and I really want to see change in the industry. So I will open it for any other panelists who, if you want to say anything or add anything, otherwise we'll move on to the next question.
This is Elise. I did want to speak on that because I heard both of you speak about therapy, and as you guys know, that's what I do. So I think it's really important to recognize that having Black therapists, people of color in that professional role is super important, because a lot of times Black people will think that therapy is not for them, or they can't find anybody that understands them or resonates them or just willing to listen and be there for them. So that is just so important to have that representation in this field of mental wellness, because like our mental and our mentality is so huge, you know, right now, but over like the generations of things that Black people and Indigenous people have experienced to really heal from all the trauma that you guys have talked about takes a lot of work and healing. And for people to understand that is so huge. One of the things I did hear you guys say was having even people that are not of color to be in that representation too. So that's being culturally competent. Just personal tidbit, I have a white therapist that noticed systematic racism as one of my issues way before all of this happened. So it is possible to have those people that are not of color to be culturally competent and aware. It just takes the willingness to step out of their comfort zone and their majority thought process, which means in schools and in professions and workplaces, you have to prioritize diversity and inclusion, which is not the case. It is not important. A lot of the therapeutic modalities that we use don't recognize cultural competency. A lot of them don't recognize diversity or different cultural practices, even psychological testing and all that stuff. It's focused on the majority and white people. So having people of color to be in these positions where we do focus on people of color and doing research studies and creating methodologies and treatment plans and modalities that focus on diversity and cultural competence is going to be a big thing. So really prioritizing people to get into these fields to represent that population is going to be so important. But the hard part is wanting to get people into these fields where they're not already represented. So having those leaders in place to get people in the field is going to be super important.
And just to relate back to Elise about therapy, I had a moment where I realized how important it is to have a therapist that looks like me. I've been going to therapy for a long time, and it took me a while before I actually decided, hey, I'm going to find a therapist that's Black. And when I did, and when I had my first session and she was talking about racism, my mind was blown because I never had a therapist talk about racism. And to know that, you know, I'm a Black woman and I dealt with racism and I never been able to talk about that with a therapist, that was profound. So it is really important.
Sheena, thank you so much for sharing your experience. And that really hit, I suppose, a lot of us in terms of the, just like Elise said as well, cultural relevance from something as simple as Chongo very in passing mention, you know, I can't tell my dad that. And it really, there's a very simple reason for it in, say, my culture, where my mother is always right. It doesn't matter if she hurt my feelings, she's always right. I will always have to apologize. I could turn 55 tomorrow and I would still have to apologize for minimally raising my voice to explain how it is that she hurt me. But at the end, I would still have to apologize to her because I hurt her feelings because she's my mother. That is a concept that is quite literally cultural. It's a very, either A, Black thing, or B, very Cameroonian thing, or C, very Douala. That's my tribe. It's a very Douala thing to do, where, you know, our parents have such importance up here, and, you know, your communication with them has to be with some sort of reverence that it probably doesn't exist in white cultures. And so the same way that Chongo mentioned, you know, or Lashana mentioned, you know, you're talking to your therapist, and having someone to whom you can say, my mother's not going to get it, without them going, well, why not? Because then now you're going to have to explain this much of your background to this person. And, you know, whereas, you know, I mean, Lashana, you mentioned it and you said, you know, person was talking to you about racism, and that's just a whole session that you had to skip to not have to explain why what happened to you was relevant, or why what happened to you was real. Or, you know, or say, you know, in Chongo, for instance, you're going through some stuff and, you know, let's say it's, God forbid, but it's, you know, it's your dad who did it. You just can't talk about it. My mom, you know, hurts my feelings. I can't go, you know, I can't talk about it with her, things like that. And I hadn't actually thought about it up until this moment, but I really appreciate all of you sharing that, because that's definitely a way that, a reason why our you know, the wellness industry needs to be there, is to be relevant with groups that they've generally ignored. And, you know, if they really say, you know, Black Lives Matter, people, non-white people matter, et cetera, well, show me those therapists, show me those wellness practitioners, show me those yoga teachers that will immediately make my experience of life feel relevant and make me feel comfortable in that space. So thank you very much, ladies.
All right, so we do have 8 minutes left in this extended session, and I think I'm going to move it on to the very last question, which is an email submission. So essentially the question here is it more helpful to focus effort on changing wellness spaces that already exist, or should we strive to build new wellness spaces that are more inclusive of us?
I think it's important to actually change spaces that already exist, because you're taking accountability for maybe the way things were, or, you know, your biases that you had. And it's important to be able to say, you know, I've done wrong in what I'm representing to the world. It needs to change. So yeah, that's what I would go for.
I would agree with that. I think that there are already many spaces to do work, rather than creating additional spaces. Not to say that additional spaces shouldn't be created. I definitely think that they should be and will be. But I think I think we would be doing a disservice if we didn't work with what we have right now. Whether that is letting things fall away or helping the evolution of things. But I feel like we really need to work with the structures that are in place, instead of feeling like we can create something new without having dismantled what has been. I think there's a lot of juice there, to be however we want to consume that.
I'm of the mind that we could do both. Just like the two panelists before me said, it's just, okay, well, we could build something new, because clearly it's not working for everybody. And I mean, there's always going to be somebody feeling disgruntled and not happy, but we really could do both. And I found that since the pandemic, and since like I said, the uprising and everything else, it's been happening that way, where the established yoga studios, again, I know I'm speaking about yoga, but I'm a yoga teacher. The established yoga studios are slowly but surely trying to do something a little different. Again, we'll check back in with them in a year, in 2 years to say, hey, was it really that different, or did you just put a Band-Aid on it? And then there's also spaces that earlier we were talking about the concept of, what's it called? Of sliding scales, etc., collectives happening, yoga teachers that have probably never taught in studios, just saying, you know what, forget the studio, let's, come together, let's do this, let's make this. So it's about creating our own spaces, and not just exclusively just for us, but just creating spaces that are a bit more inclusive of all the other folks that clearly have been ignored by the more established places. And then those established places also need to keep on working, because there's really no reason why we shouldn't be there.
All right. I agree with everything. Very valid points all raised. I think it's kind of both sides, I think, are both valid and both important. So I want to, for our very last question, just open the floor out to everybody here. Does anybody have any additional questions that you would like to have the panelists speak on? Feel free to just unmute or submit anything in the chat. Okay, so, oh, yes? Okay, perfect. I see somebody raising their hand.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this great conversation. I was wondering, we talked about tokenism before, and you've been in this industry for some time. How do you prevent being the token BIPoC person in those spaces? And as someone who's invited into the conversation, invited to these spaces, what do you think the best course of action is to bring other people in with you?
I'll just jump in. I'm not a yoga teacher, but I'll speak to kind of what I envision. So, and I guess maybe because I'm yoga adjacent, so I've done workshops in yoga studios, and my experience is, or what my awareness is now, is that one, it's a privilege to be asked to be anywhere, to do our work or service anywhere, and then of course within that ask, what does that look like? How comfortable do you feel within that? Is the compensation appropriate to what your skill set is? And then of course, if and when you do have that acceptance or feel like there is that alignment, I always have the mind to kind of say, I'm excited for this opportunity. I'd love to reassess in 3 months where we're at. Not even to say if we're both, really jiving with this experience. I'd love to, and then also too, I always have it in the back of my mind, I want to bring in so and so. I think that I could deliver this workshop maybe 3 months or 6 months down the line. I'm going to bring her in because she's a teacher and I'm a Reiki teacher, and so we could offer this together. And maybe I don't tell them that explicitly at the beginning, but I know that there's a breadth of knowledge that I have, and I have resources and connections that also have information that I think is really valuable. So I'm always coming in with that. Even if I don't say it at the outset, I do say, especially if it's a new contract or agreement or relationship, I'd like to assess in 3 months or to revisit this in 3 months to see how it's working on both sides. And then whether it's at that point initially or in that 3-month period, say hoping that I wouldn't have to say, are you bringing other people in? But if I have to say it, then at that 3-month mark say, oh, well, I'd love just to have this workshop, or I'd love to have this experience, or are you going to be bringing in other, teachers or whatnot? That's how I would speak to it.
I would say, as just mental health wise, coming into like a practice or an organization, I think it's really important just to be like authentic with yourself, not to try to be focused on being too much of the token Black person, because that does put even more pressure on you. But over the years, I've learned just to try to be who you are, do your best for you,
just adding to what the other two mentioned, check back, and you can always have genuine conversations and find out if people are not genuine. You know, it's not, you know, you check back and you have that conversation, you know, you observe, and just like Elise said, also just take off the pressure that, you know, at the same time, we really are, I mean, the BIPoC community is not a 50% of the community. So we have to be honest in terms of, we also need to mitigate our expectations. So no, I don't expect every yoga studio to have 50 Black women on their 50-person roster. But they're, so, you know, for the ones that have that one, that two, that three, it's, you know, how do you treat them? What do you do to make them feel comfortable? What are your visions in terms of either A, hiring more, or, you know, are you creating workshops that are more inclusive of the community they come from? And that to me are telltales, just like Sheena and Elise said, these are telltales on what you know, was I just brought in to be part of your photo op? Or did you understand when I said that I stand for my community, by my community, behind my community, and I would like more things to be done in my community? So Nancy, you're, you know, I've seen your Instagram. I love your posts. You're a great yoga teacher. It's a point of turning around and, you know, whatever time you're comfortable with, because there's no point jeopardizing what you're doing, but whenever you're comfortable with, you turn around to the folks that you're partnering with and saying, okay, well, I have this great idea that would involve, say, another yoga teacher of color, another organization that supports the community. What's your take on it? And from there, you could probably find out very easily where they stand on that.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just finish off with just adding a few thoughts as well, and then I think we can close off. But essentially, I want to add on to Elise's point and also bring up a point about, I'm not sure how many of you follow the makeup industry and know of Jackie Aina, but she's a really huge YouTuber, right? Like really huge, one of the biggest. And the one thing I love that she says, and she has this huge platform, and the one thing that she always does is she's like, you know what, I've got this platform and I'm using it to uplift everybody else around me. She actually just last week, she did a Black-owned makeup brands tutorial, and she specifically chose small Black-owned makeup brands. There was no Fenty Beauty in there. And so the one thing I think there's a lot of, and I think a lot of people on this panel can probably agree, is all of you are kind of big, like, you know, big faces within the industry right now, where a lot of people, like I know in the Ottawa, or I don't know, like, you know, in the Ottawa yoga community, they're reaching out to you, you're doing classes and everything, and you're vocal. But I think the one thing is there can be some guilt associated with that too. But I think if you use your platform to uplift other people, it's like you bring people along with you. Something that Kathy is doing right now that I love, I don't know if you're still doing it, but you were doing it for like the last 2 weeks, is you've been any like Black or BIPoC teacher or wellness practitioner, you have been showcasing them on your page, right? And you know, that's, I think you have over 1,000 followers on Instagram, and you don't know what that can do for those people. And I know you laugh, right? Because you want to be humble and everything, but that is a platform that you have. So I think using your platform, whatever that is, like, I think that's a really great way to be like, okay, this is, you know what I mean? These people have kind of made me this token, but how do I take that and use it to bring people with me, right? And another thing I was going to say is whenever, and this is what Elise was saying, is, you know, for me, a really big thing is I'm a yoga teacher and I can teach yoga, but I don't like teaching weekly classes. It just takes too much energy out of me. I really like special offerings. That's more my thing. So whenever people come up to me and they're like, hey, Chongo, we want you to teach this like weekly offering, I have to take a step back and say, you know what? This isn't my thing, and I don't want to be the face of this, but I know so many other people in my community who actually would love to do this. So you tell those people, hey, this isn't really my thing, but I know all of these great teachers who maybe you didn't consider. So I think when you've been given that position, there's always a way to flip it into a more positive way to uplift other people, and knowing yourself and knowing why you're doing things and what your intention is, I think that can really take you forward. So that's kind of my points on that. So I know it's a tough one, but I'll open the floor to the panelists, and if not, yeah, does anybody have anything else to say? Okay, I think we're good. So I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who's still here. We've still got 18 of you. Like this is really great. It's been such a good conversation. And I know all of the panelists are so grateful that you're here. And I know all of you guys are so grateful to hear such amazing words. So thank you so much for being here. And Beatrice, I think I'll pass it off to you to say goodbye because we haven't really heard from you today. And yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, thank you. I hate being sort of the face. I mentioned in the beginning, I'm not really big on public speaking, but yeah, thank you for attending. It means a lot. I wasn't expecting a big turnout, but like 27 people is more than enough. So thank you for that. Thank you for all the panelists for like sticking past the 9 p.m. and Shanga for like leading the discussion and just being a facilitator for this whole discussion. Hopefully, maybe in the next few months, we'll be able to do this more face-to-face and not sort of virtually. So yeah, so thank you so much. And I'll pass it to you, Shanga, if you want to close it. If you have, or if anyone has anything that they want to say or share, you're welcome to do so.
Perfect. So we will formally close this session, and thank you so much to Beatrice and Women of Color Remake Wellness for creating this space for such an amazing conversation. Thank you all for being here, and to everybody who left, you know, just put the positive intentions to them too. And thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.